This is Startup Playbook, an All Turtles podcast series that shares advice from founders and product teams about how they tackle some of entrepreneurship's biggest challenges. I'm your host, Marie McCoy Thompson. Throughout this series, we've talked a lot about best practices for building product teams and turning an idea into something that attracts investors. Now it's time we examine the process of building the actual product. And the type of product we're focusing on today is hardware. Product development for hardware is a different beast than it is for other types of products, but it has elements that are universal for any kind of entrepreneurial endeavor. To showcase the hardware development process, in this episode, I'm talking to the co-founders of Sunflower Labs. They share stories of how, in the process of creating their product, they've crash-landed into neighbors' yards and set off pink smoke bombs, all in the name of getting their product just right. They offer tips for testing and gaining a full understanding of the problem they're trying to solve. So, let's meet the founders.
Hi, I'm Alex Pachikov. I'm a founder and CEO of Sunflower Labs.
Hi, I'm Chris Eheim. I'm Alex's co-founder and CTO of Sunflower Labs.
You can also say founder.
Are you? You can say that.
I can say founder.
I think so, right?
Founder.
Somehow I find that co-founder is a different title than founder, but you can have more than one founder. It's not an exclusive title. You can have more than one manager. It's not co-managers.
We founded the company together, so we're co-founders.
No, we're both founders of the company.
Anyway.
Sorry, is this going to make that?
Oh, yeah.
I think you're going to have to edit this out.
Anyway, it's just my personal opinion.
Okay, so we have two founders.
Indeed.
If you could also, just by way of introduction, give an overview of Sunflower Labs. What is Sunflower Labs?
Sunflower Labs makes next generation type of security solution. So it's a drone-based security solution that uses advanced sensors that you place on your property that detect motion and vibration, analyze what they see or what they detect. And if they detect something unusual, they can deploy a fully autonomous drone. The drone is essentially a flying security camera. It takes off, flies over to where the action is, sends you live video. You can tell it to look at other places on your property, or you can tell it to do a security sweep just to fly around slowly and look at everything. And when it's done, it comes back and it lands gracefully in its landing pad that we call the Hive, where it lives and charges.
Beautiful. Seems like you've said that a few times in your life.
First time. Rolls off the tongue.
And what are the products that Sunflower Labs has developed so far?
Well, essentially it's one product, which is the Sunflower Labs Home Awareness System. It consists of three components. You want to talk about the components?
Yes.
He insists on calling them components.
The three components are, first off, what we call the sunflowers. They're the outdoor security sensors. They detect intrusion onto the property. They can detect and track objects. You can open the app and you can deploy the second component on the system, and we call it the B. That's the drone. It's a flying security camera. After it's done, it returns to the Hive, as Alex already said. It lands there. It recharges there and is protected from the elements. And that's the base station we call the Hive. It lives outside 24/7 and protects the bee. That's its job.
Yeah. So essentially it's sunflowers, bees, and the Hive. These are the three components.
What is the problem that you're solving for that other types of security systems do not address?
We want to solve the problem of giving you a complete understanding and awareness of what's happening in your property at any time without violating your privacy constantly by just installing dozens of cameras. So our sensors are very privacy conscious. They only record motion and vibration data. And then we only have essentially one security camera, but it's dynamic. It can go to where the action is. It can follow the action around. It can do the security sweep to kind of give you a peace of mind that everything is okay. And it comes back and it lands.
Yeah, makes sense. So it seems like the first step in product development is just ideation. What kinds of things were you thinking through very early on when you were just sketching out what this system may look like in the future?
A lot of pretty random stuff. So we kind of started out with the premise that we thought a drone would make a great security camera. But the issue that we ran into right away, well, two issues. One is, how does it know where it needs to go? And two, where does it live and how does it charge, essentially? So So we solved both of those things in slightly different ways. The idea with the sunflowers was an evolution of discussions that we had of different ways to place the sensors. And we basically spent, I don't know, a couple of 100 hours probably discussing all of this, between a few months. And we really liked the idea of being able to place these sunflowers anywhere in your property. And then also, we wanted them to have a different purpose, not just security, because you don't want to just put like these security sticks around the house, right? But so we wanted them to be lights. And then the light also gives us this additional advantage. If the drone is flying at night, it gives us the additional illumination that we need,
Well, it's maybe important to mention that they weren't actually lights at first, right? They turned into garden lights, right? We knew we had to have these sensors. We had some preliminary, sort of a design for, these outdoor sensors. And then we had the discussion. It's like, well, if you want to put these on the property somewhere, why would people like to just stick sort of these weird looking sensors around the yard, right? Not many people would like to have that, but, one reason for it to be there is if it also is a garden light, right? And it's a pretty garden light. We have in our opinion, I guess, we have a very great design for these garden lights. And so they're now lights. And the other aspect of it is that, so now we actually do have light control on the ground while the drone is flying at night. So when the drone is airborne at night, we can turn the lights on full bright, and we actually get illumination on the ground of the area.
Of the different components, was there one that you focused on developing first, or were you developing them all in tandem because they go together so tightly?
The most important aspects of the entire solution is that the drone lands itself. I mean, basically, if the drone doesn't land, right, then we don't have a product, right? That's truly like the core of our system, right? The drone needs to land.
If it doesn't land, it doesn't charge. If it doesn't charge, it can't fly again. If it can't fly again, then it's useless.
And then at which point you also don't need the sensors to tell you what's going on because, there's no drone to go look at, what's going on. So that was a big focus. And we had a lot of discussions about how the drone lands. All kinds of crazy ideas. And we ended up with a very elegant solution, I think, to this problem.
What were some of those crazy ideas?
One idea was sort of that you have a bell sort of sitting outside. It's kind of like, on a stick, like kind of a birdhouse, maybe like looking thing. And the drone actually goes underneath. It kind of comes in from the bottom and maybe gets like sucked up. That was one idea. The other idea was that the base station was actually a cone and the drone was sort of a ring shape. So you're actually landing, this ring on this cone, right? And we ended up essentially doing the inverse of that, which the drone is now kind of the cone, and the shape of the base station is like a funnel, right? So it's this cone that centers itself inside of this funnel, and it proved to be a really good idea. It's working out really, really well, and it's quite elegant. There are no moving parts to it.
The unique shape of our drone, it's entirely came out of this exercise. So the shape of the drone is in support of its primary mission, which is to land reliably and accurately. Because if you can do that, then you can charge, and then everything is okay. So when people look at our drone, they often say, why are you guys making your own drone? Have you considered buying something off the shelf and then putting your landing and charging mechanism on it? And the answer is, we considered it, but you can't do that. It's primarily designed for this purpose. Everything else is a derivative of that initial design decision. So you can't take somebody else's drone that maybe flies well and then tack on all this other stuff, right? That changes the vehicle characteristics so much. So in order to solve the problem, we had to design the entire system from scratch. So I guess to answer your question, designing the drone and the landing platform kind of came hand in hand. The design of the sunflowers was a separate project, but there's all three components share between one another. So you really can't have a system with just 2 out of 3. They all complement each other really well.
Mm-hmm. So thinking about just the timeline of this, because the ultimate design that you came up with is sort of the end result of, I'm sure, many iterations of this product. Can you talk through a little bit about what those steps were? We talked a little bit ideation, and then from there, where do you go? If you're trying to build a product, what's the first thing that you do?
Start hacking away. That's basically what we did. We didn't even, it was before we raised money, and Chris and I would just we built racing drones for fun, just to see what's it like to build a racing drone. He started making sensors and he had them set up around his house. You start somewhere. If you actually try to consider all of the things that you need to do, you'll never get out of bed. It's just way too much. I like to joke, but it's really not a joke. Had I known how difficult this project's going to be, I would have never started it. But day by day, you have a good team. You solve a problem every day. You feel encouraged. You solve another problem. Maybe you get stuck on something, and you give it a few days. You just keep moving on. So by the time we started raising money, we had a prototype that Chris mostly hacked together just in his living room.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer in iterating. So it's like you can plan all you want right at the beginning. You can build this one thing that you have in your head, and it's not going to really be a good product, right? Because you didn't take advantage of sort of the learning you can do while you're iterating, while you're developing the product, right? So I'm a believer in sort of let's do something, that sounds like it's a good idea. Let's just move ahead, do that, test it, fly it in case of a drone, land it and all that, and then go from there, right? Then you learn and you iterate.
And don't be afraid to throw stuff away. A lot of times you try something and it's yeah, that's clearly not going to work, or that's not a good solution. So we had lots of early iterations that, we're okay, well, that was cool. Let's actually solve this in a different way. And Chris and I spend a fair amount of time just discussing these things. And, sometimes late at night, one of us will have a moment of clarity. Just wait a minute, whoa, we did this all backwards. This should be, the funnel should be flying and the drone should be on the ground. No, then you wake up and you reconsider. But yeah, you shouldn't stay married to an idea. A lot of people just maybe they think this is such a brilliant idea and they don't want to tell anybody and they don't want to deviate from it at all. I would say do the opposite. If you have an idea, share it, get feedback, and then constantly iterate. And don't be afraid to just to throw it away, start from scratch, because it's not really from scratch. You're starting from the experience that you just had and the mistakes that you maybe just made.
Do you remember specifically any of those middle of the night moments of clarity?
Well, one of those was certainly that that the sunflower should be garden light. Right?
Yeah, that's definitely a middle of the night moment. Because it was really dark that night, and you're oh my god, I have a brilliant idea. They should be lights. Well, we had so many. It's what's a little bit tricky is that a lot of these really awesome middle of the night moments that we had, we haven't built yet and we haven't shown yet. So they're just really cool ideas that are still in the pipeline for us. But a lot of the design iterations, we're just sketching stuff on the napkin, late at night, and just saying, wait a minute, what if you did it this way? What if you did it this way? And then the next day, when you sober up, you start kind of considering what are the practical implications, and you'll be surprised. A lot of stuff is crazy, obviously, but a lot of stuff that morning you're still thinking about, and then we would talk again at the office and be yeah, that actually was not a crazy idea. Let's give it a try.
One thing that really helped us in terms of sort of hardware, iterating on the hardware, is we had 3D printers at the office, which really allowed us to have crazy ideas at night, come in the morning, basically design it, and then print it and look at it, right? Have actually a physical thing in front of us. And I think that really, really helped a lot.
One thing, and I'm not sure if this was the middle of the night or not, but when we were considering what the shape of our base station should be, we were trying to imagine it's a thing that you're going to have in your backyard, right? And so what kind of things do you have in your backyard? And it's okay, you have a barbecue. Okay, so barbecue is actually one potential sort of design direction. You might have an air conditioning unit, and it's not pretty, but it's something you would have. And we were sort of looking at sort of design inspiration from these different things you might have in your backyard. And the one thing I didn't consider that Chris brought up, which is ultimately what the design became, is a doghouse. A doghouse is not only something you'll have in the backyard, but it's something that you would actually have relatively visible in your backyard. And, a dog also serves a security purpose. There's so many kind of connotations. So if you look at the design of our base station, it looks like a doghouse. It's not an accident. But the side benefit of that is that it's sloped roof, so it keeps the snow off, and it's, it's not too big, and it's something you might, not feel bad about having, out in your yard, and one thing after the other. And then that became the design that we decided to pursue.
And what were the different kinds of tests that you ran along the way? I know that you were doing wind tests, for example. How did you do those kinds of things?
We bought a giant, what's it called? Leaf blower. Yeah. So as a drone lands, I'm standing there with a giant leaf blower trying to mess with it. We also bought a humongous fan. How big is that fan?
I don't know, probably
5 feet or something, right?
No, not quite. Maybe, 3, 4.
Anyway, we bought this huge fan. I think it's like what they use in Hollywood to simulate like your hair blowing in the wind, for a nice shot. So we might need to do some glamour shots, by the way. So we should consider that. What's actually funny is because our system needs to work in outdoor conditions. A lot of testing is like, oh, the weather is really bad. Okay, let's go fly. So stuff like that.
The other test we did that was a lot of fun was actually the smoke test. So we wanted to study sort of the the air turbulence essentially when the drone is landing. So one of the problems when a drone lands or any sort of rotorcraft or a helicopter as well, right, there's a lot of ground effect basically. The air that's being pushed down is being pushed back by the ground. Right? When we decided we were going to have this funnel for the landing. If it's just a funnel without any openings, right? You can imagine that the air that's getting pushed in there is just, it's kind of messing with the drone itself. In fact, at some point we saw the drone couldn't even land anymore, right? At minimal thrust, it wouldn't actually go down anymore because it was just sitting on this cushion of air. And so we, tried different things to get the air out, and as part of those tests is we had smoke bombs essentially and the smoke machine, which made for really fun tests, for really fun pictures and videos of it as well. At some point, in fact, so our office is in Zurich, Switzerland, our R&D office where we do the development and testing essentially. It's a house. The reason for that is so we can test the system right there and then too. But when we were doing these smoke bomb tests, essentially at some point we looked up and just the entire neighborhood was just in this fog.
Well, how did the neighbors feel about that?
We didn't get any complaints that day, actually.
No.
Are they used to you just doing weird things over there?
At this point, probably, we had 1 or 2 sort of minor complaints in the beginning. There's something called quiet hours in Switzerland, which I learned about. So we violated that a couple of times. That doesn't matter. We had a few relatively small complaints. I'll tell you a fun story, or at least as I remember that story. One of our neighbors there was kind of like a local hero, because football or soccer in Switzerland is really big, and he was the head coach, and he's one of our neighbors. And we crashed a drone into his roof one day. And Chris and another guy went over to his house, to apologize and to ask, can we get the drone off your roof?
My head down, my tail between my legs.
And then apparently he was not put off at all. He was actually he was kind of cool about it. And because he's a coach, he gave him a little motivational talk. The gist of it was that without people like you, there'll be no progress in civilization. So since then, he actually, what's funny is that we lost another drone in the forest. It got out of hand, and he also found it in the forest. So this guy is our drone savior.
He's become your biggest advocate.
Yeah, but that's it's par for the course, if you have a drone company.
Yeah, I guess so. Can you pull up that picture again?
Yeah.
So Alex has this picture. I'm just going to describe it because this is a podcast and I can't show you. So you're on the ground with your phone out. Is that what you're...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's a huge billowing cloud of pink smoke surrounding this drone that's trying to fly up into the air from the grass.
From the base station, essentially.
From the base station.
Which you can't see because it's obscured.
It's like a prototype. It's like this metal bucket thing that we built for our initial test.
There you go. Okay, so the drone is trying to leave the base station in this huge cloud of bright pink smoke. Why pink? I gotta ask.
It came in all the different colors. It was just like one of these like kid birthday party smoke bomb sets or something. And so this is a real test where we're trying to test airflow and just see how it goes. And of course, you can't see it, so you have to use a smoke bomb or something. And Chris ordered a bunch of these. They came in all different colors, so people thought maybe we had a party or something like that.
Might as well get different colors if they have different colors, right?
But then later, we did more of these tests, and we had to get one of these fog machines that you would get like at a teenage disco in the 80s. So we basically had one of those, and we fogged up the whole neighborhood with that. So yeah, we do stuff like this. It's an essential aspect of product development.
So is your Amazon recommended list just completely confused at this point?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, it recommends a lot of strange stuff. This is a product development podcast, so this is a very tangible examples of what product development is like.
Yeah, that actually brings me to my next question, which is these are the kinds of tests that you're running because you have a hardware product. Mm-hmm. And you've made different kinds of products in the past, I know for sure. I'm not sure your background as much. What are the types of things? I mean, these kinds of tests are one type of example of the kinds of things that you run into when you start getting into hardware. What are other things that people should be thinking about if they're thinking about creating a hardware product as opposed to a different type of product?
Aside smoke bombs?
Well, I mean, it very much depends on what kind of hardware product that is. I mean, one of the, the big things for us too is, we have RF emitters in our system. We have, so the communication link between the drone and the base station and between the sensors and the base station is wireless, right? It's RF communication. And so you also have to, make sure that you don't violate any of the FCC rules, right? So there's going to be a lot of tests that need to be run. And usually those, you hire a certified test lab to do these kinds of tests for you.
All sorts of environmental stuff, right? If you're making a hardware product, whether it's indoor or outdoor, maybe it's for a car, like there are just so many different environmental factors that you should consider. Obviously temperature, humidity, sunlight, daylight, nighttime, radio interference, microwaves. Like this is sort of like you don't think about the stuff when you're building a drone security system, but like, oh yeah, like there's a potential that you're sending out your drone to explore something, and then you have something in your house which is jamming it. Like microwave actually isn't the case for us, but with some products it very much could be. And we've had issues with just random home appliances interfering with us. So you just have to consider all of that, and you have to test it.
So lots of testing, as with any type of product, it sounds like.
Just constant testing. I kind of insist at our company that we fly every day. Just because I want data from what's it like to fly and different weather conditions, different times of day, different whatever might be different, right? So the more testing you do, the better. And you want testing to be just an integral part of your workflow. You don't want it to be work, test, and then everything is broken. So you want to work and test, and maybe you have one team which is constantly testing and the other team constantly fixing it.
I mean, that's a big part too of development, right? Is like actually use the product, right? And let other people use the product, because they do things to the product that you never expected, somebody to do to your product. So you also learn a lot from that.
Yeah, watch other people try to use your product. It's one of the more painful things you can do to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But necessary.
Absolutely necessary, yeah. If you want other people to use it eventually.
Which hopefully that's why you're building it, yeah.
Well, funny you should say that. Initially we started building it because I wanted one. So technically mission accomplished. But now other people want one. So now we have to do a lot more work.
That seems like something that I've heard from other people as well. A reason why they start making something is because it's what they want to see in the world. Seems like that's a pretty legitimate reason to go into making something.
Yeah, it helps to know what the problem is and to know if you solved it or not. So if it's not a problem you understand, then you don't actually know if you've solved it. And I know lots of people who do products for industries that they're not from, right? And so like I couldn't do like a farming drone or something. Like I don't know the first thing about farming. I don't know like is this the right thing? Is this the problem? But the system that we're building, very much the initial target market was me, like it was my house. And I didn't want to have a ton of cameras, but I had all sorts of random stuff happening. I live next to a forest, so there's just constant animals and teenagers and teenage animals and so forth. I just wanted to be able to observe it and to scare them away. It's mostly raccoons. Honestly, 99% of my problems are raccoons, apparently. But still, same, right? So now that I have the drone, I can say, okay, this is a great raccoon deterrent. Can I do other things?
So Phil talks about product development in relation to this good, fast, cheap triangle. I don't know if you're familiar with his spiel on this, but I'm curious if this is something that you had in mind while you were going through, and whether, at least in his perspective on this, you can only pick 2 of these things at a time to focus on, and it depends on which stage of product development that you're at. So
I'd say you can only pick 1.
Really?
Yeah, I think like 2 is sort of wishful thinking.
Huh. Okay. So which one at a time are you focusing on?
Fast.
Yeah, I mean, out of necessity as well, right? And in a startup, you have to move fast, or you're not going to survive, right? So you got to move to you got to hit that next milestone fast. Now, good would also be nice, and I think we're building a good product, but there is sort of a trade-off between fast and perfect also, right? You can never build a perfect product. That's maybe another important thing you got to realize, right away. It's like you're not going to build a perfect thing, right? Because if you're looking to build a perfect thing, then you're going to be at it forever, and you're not going to make it, right? So it's also, you have to define what is actually sort of good enough, right? Guess what's the minimum viable product ultimately, right?
Because you can improve the product. You can see what the problems are. Over time, right. You can make it cheaper. You can sort of reduce the cost. As much as we are very thrifty, I mean, our systems are expensive. Like, developing is expensive. Hardware is expensive. Electronics are expensive. But I think our main strength is how quickly we can, iterate. We have an idea, and we put a plan together usually on Mondays, and usually by Fridays, we're testing some first prototype of that iteration. And that includes mechanical engineers, 3D printing stuff downstairs, electrical engineers soldering boards, software guys putting the firmware and the software into it. And then, very quickly you can start seeing the first fruits of your labor. And then you can make a decision. It's like, okay, well, yeah, obviously this is not the right way to go. Throw all of this away, keep moving. A lot of companies in the hardware space will have these cycles of months, and then it takes you 3 months to realize this was a stupid idea. Well, you just burned through $500,000. So,
and that's the advantage of being such a small startup, is how nimble you can be.
Yeah, I think that's fundamental, basically, for startups to be nimble and small, and to make decisions and to discard ideas as quickly as possible. Very few meetings, very, very little overhead. It's like, yeah, we tried it. It's stupid. Next.
What are your visions for the future of product development at Sunflower Labs?
We think that drones for security is going to be a much bigger use case for drones than any other use case of drones. Like, the predominant use case right now is vacation videos and photos, right? That's the number one, purpose for people buying drones is that I'm going to go to Hawaii and I'm going to fly around on the beach. That's at least what everybody thinks. But, there's 1 million to 2 of those drones out in the market. Then the second one after that is some commercial uses, like maybe surveying or mining or something like that. But now that's not millions anymore. That's maybe tens of thousands or something like that. We think that drones for security just make sense. And they make sense in residential settings. It makes sense in commercial settings. It makes sense in industrial settings. They make sense in agricultural settings, and, maybe even, governmental and military and border security and things like that. To me, it's just so obvious, right? And when we talk to people about, what we're doing, a lot of times like, well, who else is working in the drone security space? And it's like, that's kind of the wrong question, right? It's like, I think the right question is, why isn't everybody working in the drone security space? That is such an obvious thing that's going to be enormous. I said this sort of off the cuff, and now I like it, so now I'm going to say it deliberately. But we think that drones for security will be more common than Ubers, ultimately.
What would you say to anyone who listens to that vision of the future and feels nervous about, for example, privacy issues or security being taken to the next level that's beyond what we see now, and raises anxiety in people. How do you feel about that, and how do you answer those kinds of questions?
Well, privacy issues are easy to answer. Our solution is fewer cameras than there are in the world today. And those cameras announce themselves as opposed to just being everywhere. So anybody who says, and somebody sort of pointed out, said, oh, it's creepy to have a drone. And it's like, well, but it's not creepy that you're recorded everywhere you go at all times, by the government. So like, just because you don't know that you're being recorded doesn't make it less creepy, right? A drone which is flying is very much a deliberate act. You know that there is a security camera that's looking at you, especially if it's over your property. You want it there, right? And if it's an intruder, he doesn't. And I think that aligns all of the incentives just right. So, I don't think this is kind of a matrix, where those octopus-looking things, kind of are poking around everywhere. Or, I think it's more of a Star Wars Episode 5, when they deploy the probe droids to Hoth. I think it's a little bit more of kind of a deliberate send the drone to take a look type of situation. But, it's the future. The future is frightening and scary, So cars are going to be driving themselves. Delivery drones are going to be delivering your toothpaste, left and right. DoorDash is already delivering stuff with robots. So it's just, it's happening, So society takes time to accept these things, but ultimately some pushback from society, some improvements in technology will then come to kind of an equilibrium.
There are going to be a lot of drones flying around for security purposes that are going to, yes, record you, have video of you. But again, as Alex said, that's not different than what you have already. You are being recorded. You're walking through San Francisco. There's, basically a camera looking at you all the time. You just don't know it. And yes, at least with a drone, you will know that you're being watched.
It was the same level of, societal discontent about camera phones. So, 2006, 2007, people were like, wait, what? Everyone's going to have a camera all the time taking pictures of everything? Yes. So that happened, and not so bad in the end.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Not as great as your Matrix and Star Wars analogies, but...
Can't beat Star Wars analogies.
Pretty good. Is there anything else that you want to add?
No, somebody is interested in what we're doing, get in touch with us. Find out more at sunflowerlabs.com. And we're generally hiring talented engineers, particularly around the Zurich area. So if you happen to be there, definitely get in touch. And, if you have a big home and you'd like a drone flying around it, then reach out definitely as well. So coming soon to a home near you.
You heard it here first. Security drones, the next Ubers. That's how a product development process can go from messing around with pink smoke to potentially, one day, world domination. This podcast is a production of the All Turtles worldwide media empire. We recorded this episode in the Donatello Studios in San Francisco, California. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, send us an email at hello@all-turtles.com. I read every message. This episode was produced by me, Marie McCoy-Thompson. Thanks to Jim Metzendorf for editing this episode, Chris Plogue for his audio expertise, Ali Packard for our artwork, and Matt Ammerman for our theme music. On behalf of Phil Libin, Alex and Chris, and everyone at Sunflower Labs and All Turtles, thanks for listening.